So, yes, I'm going to talk on a vision of a new world. Well, I'm going to just share a few reflections with you, because we're then going to have the panel, and that's going to be, you're going to actually hear from three people who have really been engaged and committed to thinking about creating a new world in their way. I'm going to start with, well, this centre was opened in 1978, and it was a momentous occasion when this centre was opened. I wasn't there, but I've just been imagining it. I'm imagining how people felt, knowing that for the first time there was a London a centre for Buddhists in East London. Bhante Sangharakshita opened the centre. He's a founder of Triratna, and he named this whole complex Sukhavati. So it's the London Buddhist Centre, but when he was talking about it, he was talking, this is also Sukhavati. Sukhavati means the Pure Land. And it's inspired by, on the Buddha on the shrine is Amitabha. Amitabha is an archetypal Buddha, and he's said to preside over the Pure Land. So what's a Pure Land? What is a Pure Land? Well, just imagine a place where you get everything you need. You immediately have a wish and it's fulfilled. Imagine a place that's incredibly beautiful, where there's golden forests and every plant is medicinal or healing, and there's oceans and sunsets that set their cast over the ocean. Imagine a space and a place where everything communicates beauty. Everything communicates love. Maybe there's a bird that flies overhead and it sings a song that just opens your heart. If your heart's already opened if you're in the Pure Land, of course, because in the Pure Land there's no suffering, there's no limitation. Everything is possible. Everything can be created for the benefit of others, for the benefit of beings. In a way, the Pure Land, this other dimension of being, is a different level of consciousness, where you see everything as beautiful, as speaking of the truth and on of love. So he called the London Buddhist Centre, the sort of complex of it, the Sukhavati, the Pure Land. But there's pure lands, as I'm describing, and there's impure Pure Lands, yeah? So an impure Pure Land, well, in a way, we're kind of living in one, you could say, because, well, we're in the world, and we have this historical Buddha, Shakyamuni, who founded Buddhism, who broke free into enlightenment, who attained liberation, and then shared his teachings. And he could see that, we were all in different states of suffering. But he could also see that we all had this great potential, and that if we went on a journey, a path, we could discover that potential for ourselves. We could actually expand our consciousness, expand our minds, and actually live a life which was truly beneficial for us and for ourselves and others. Live a life that was deeply rooted in beauty, deeply rooted in love, deeply rooted in wisdom. That's what the Buddha Shakyamuni saw. And in a way, we're living in it, but it's impure, isn't it? Because actually, to do those things, you have to go on a journey. It doesn't just happen. I remember when I was young, kind of thinking, why is the world the way it is? Why is it like this? Why is there so much suffering? Why am I suffering? I didn't want to suffer, and I didn't want to see suffering around me. And yet, I didn't know at that point the journey that I had to go, in a way, inwards to discover what some of that suffering was about. But I did see inspirational people who presented a different way of being. I saw when I was growing up, Martin Luther King. I heard about him and his dreams, and how he brought some of those dreams, at least for a while, into some reality. And then I heard about Nelson Mandela. And I saw that in the depths of prison, he had a dream as well, that people could actually live united. And he brought that dream out of prison, and people believed in that dream and actually then wanted to bring that about. So we have this impure land whereby, there's all kinds of suffering going on, and yet there we have this great potential as human beings. We can actually live with love. We can actually have beauty. We can actually be united. If we do that, if we go on a journey, it doesn't just happen. In the pure land, it's just there. It's just all around you. Everything communicates that. In the impure land, you have to go. You have to work with it. You have to work for it. You have to go on this journey. So when Bhante Sangharakshita named this place Sukhavati, he was doing two things, I think. He was saying it's possible. It's possible that we can create a world in East London, for London's an international, multicultural, multiracial place. We can create this world whereby we can discover these qualities, these values. We can expand our consciousness so we're not limited by the way our ordinary, habitual, reactive minds work. We can have a place where we can go on a journey and be free, learn to be free from suffering. That's what he was saying. He was saying it's possible, and in an impure, pure land, we have to create the conditions for it to happen. And that's what this centre was born for. Now, 2 years before this centre was open, Bhante gave a series of lectures in Brighton. And in it, he set out the whole vision, really, of what Triratna was about. And I was thinking today, he gave these lectures when the London Buddhist Centre was being built. It hadn't yet opened. So I think he was really thinking about this place when he gave those lectures. He was thinking about the whole Triratna, I'm sure. But we weren't that big. It'd been like 10 years old at the time he gave these lectures. So it wasn't huge. He talked about it as if it was huge, but it really wasn't. But this centre had been founded, and the work would have already been going on. Building work was happening, and it would become the largest centre in Triratna at that time. So he was really thinking, I think, about this. And he gave 4 lectures. The first was a method of personal development, which was really setting out, like how we can practice, what this path can look like, for us as individuals. So we meditate. We teach meditation at every centre. We teach meditation. But it's not just meditation. We also bring other things in to support, meditation practice. So we do, for example, here yoga and qigong. Some of our yoga and qigong people are in the room today. We do, there's poetry. We really focus on the arts. All forms of poetry as well, all forms of the arts. We have ritual and devotion. We have ways of just helping the local community, like we have a carers project here. So, there's all these different ways that support practice. Study as well is another one, and ethical observance. All of those things are supporting practice. This was a method of personal development. And then the second talk is called The Vision of Human Existence. And in this talk, he really shares the Buddha's vision, because Triratna is very much rooted in the Buddhist traditions, in the very roots of the Buddhist tradition. So he talks about the Buddha, the historical Buddha, and what he saw when he became enlightened. He saw that everything, the whole of life, is dependent on conditions, comes into being on conditions, and ceases when those conditions cease. And he saw that this just keeps happening. We keep going round and round and round and round. And then, but the Buddha also saw that there's 2 different types of conditioning or conditionality. There's a round and round, habitual, reactive, here I am again, going through the same old experience, this is difficult, that. And then there's a spiral whereby you go, is there another way? Is there another way? There has to be another way. How can I create something that actually is going to be beneficial? That moment when you stop and go, I need to do something different now. This doesn't work. That moment. And this spiral conditionality starts off with that space, that pause. And then you go on a journey where your mind expands, it becomes more and more creative. And you actually traverse through different levels of consciousness until you break free. And he saw both, the Buddha saw that both of those conditions are happening. But one is very familiar to us and one less so, one that we have to go on a journey to discover. That was the second talk. The third was a nucleus of a new society. And that's where he said, actually, if we're doing this journey, if we're following this path, we need to come together. We need to come together as Buddhists. We need to come together as fellow practitioners, fellow journeyers, and create a community whereby we're practicing, working with each other. So this third lecture is really about the formation of the spiritual community in Triratna. And the fourth, which is what I'm going to draw on tonight, is a blueprint of a new world. And this one, he said, was quite different to the other lectures, because the other lectures, the first two is very much around, the Buddhist path, all the different elements of a Buddhist path. The second one was around the Buddha's vision. So those existed already in a way. But the third one was around the formation of a new community that he was already been engaged in for the last 9-10 years. The fourth one, he said, he's got a dream. It doesn't quite exist yet. Because his fourth one was very much around, well, how does this community, how does the London Buddhist Centre have an impact in the world? What does that look like? And he said for that, I'll tell you his quote. He said, "What we imagine today, we must execute tomorrow. And the dream of the night may become the reality of the morning." So he starts off in this lecture saying, so let me imagine, let me dream. And we may find that we are closer to waking, closer to reality than we had thought. He actually starts off that lecture saying that, really, a lot of people are dissatisfied with the world. If we think about this vision of this new world, certainly I did that. So when I come think about the vision of the new world, I can have my inspiration, but quite quickly I also think about, what does the world really look like right now? Like, is it really possible that we can have a new world? Because when you look around at the world that we're in, it sometimes doesn't give you a lot of hope, a lot of scope for hope, because you can immediately see the problems in it. For me, though, I felt like as growing up, I saw I saw a lot of challenges. I saw poverty, I saw racism. There was a real rise of the far right, which is kind of interesting now that we're back here again. But there was a real rise of the far right when I was growing up. So it meant that for me, very practically, I wasn't sure if I walked down the street whether there'd be hostility or not. So it was very present for me. And that's just one of the things, one of the issues. There's a lot of poverty in this area as well. I grew up first not far from here, just down the road, spent some of my early childhood. So for me, it was like, I see some of the challenges of reality. It's in my personal experiences out in the world. And at the same time, I couldn't, as a child growing up, I really thought there has to be some other way. I really felt that. And then I looked for those inspirational figures. So in a way, if you think about the challenge of the world, you're also, I think on some level, thinking about what do you want instead? What's possible instead of that? It sort of takes you to that question. So Bhante, in a way, that was there. He wanted a different world. He wanted a vision of a new world. But he said, it's not a world that's just a slightly improved version of what we have. It's like we really have to imagine, because I don't think maybe we don't go far enough in our imaginings. We just think, I want this problem to stop, or I want that problem to stop. But what do we want instead? Like, what would actually make us feel like, wow, like, this is incredible. It's worthwhile of all of my efforts. What does that look like? Rather than just a little bit of less of that and a little bit less of that. And he says, I'll quote him, he says, we don't really, so usually he says, we don't really want a new world at all. We only want an improved version, even a slightly improved version of the old world. But the world of which we are dreaming tonight is really a new world, a world radically different from the old. And I like that because it's like when he says like, it's like being in a car and you're like, oh, this car, maybe it's a bit like not working so well and you have to keep taking it to the garage, and rather than going, actually, maybe I don't want to be in a car. Maybe I don't want to be sitting in traffic. Maybe there's a whole new way of transportation or something. It's more, rather than that, it's going, let me change a clutch. That's the kind of equivalent. Let me change a clutch. Let me maybe get a nicer car, a slightly more colourful car, or a more comfortable one. That's the analogy. He wants us to go, let's actually think about a whole new way of transportation that doesn't demand so much fuel, for example, that actually is kinder to the environment, that actually, somehow people don't get into road rage, when they're stuck in traffic. Let's actually imagine something completely different. But then when people start thinking about changing the world, two issues usually come up. One is, we've got to change the system. That's one view. The system doesn't work. Capitalist system, this system, whatever description you have of it, it doesn't work. So we need to get rid of the system. Now, the fact is, that's also been tried over years, hasn't it? People have there's been revolutionaries and there's been different kind of governments that have happened. People have really put a lot of effort and time, given their lives, actually, to changing whatever system they were in. And we also know, if you studied any history, that sometimes it's better, sometimes it's improved in some way, people are happier, but actually we know that fundamentally something still remains, Suffering still remains in some way. So he says there's two camps. One is change the system, because it's a system that's the problem. Change the economic system, the political system, all the system, let's change it. But the other one says, and because once people have a good system, they'll be able to grow and be happy. That's that view. And the other one is, it's not the system. It's that the problem is in the depths of the human heart. That's really where the issue is. We're just going to recreate the problems if you just focus on the system. So just focus on the individual. Let's just all focus on our own individual minds and hearts, and then that will be better for us at least. Yeah. Do you see the problem we've got there? That the fact is, Bhante says, neither's correct. Neither's correct. They're not mutually exclusive. We have to do somehow both. So basically, and the reason why we have to do both is because he says that our actual conditions of life, the external conditions, because often if you're thinking about yourself as a spiritual practitioner, you think, okay, I just need to sort myself out. If I can just learn how to be better, somehow that will help my life. And that is true, absolutely true. And we still encounter the challenges of life. Yeah, we can't be like sealed from life. It's going to have an impact one way or the other. So somehow we have to find a way of engaging with the conditions of life. And he says the reason why we have to do both, it's not just changing the system and it's not just changing ourselves, is because our conditions do have an effect on us. The conditions that we're actually in, they have quite a profound effect on us. He says they can help. If we have good conditions, they can help our growth. So we want to grow, we want to be happy, we want to, feel like, we're creating more and more awareness, more and more love, touching into those values of beauty and love and truth. We want that on some level, we want that. But we need the conditions to help us bring that into being. We can't do it all by ourselves. And he says if your system that you're in, the kind of environmental and political and social system, cultural world that you're in, if that supports your growth, then that's fantastic, isn't it? You're kind of making your own efforts, but you're supported by the context that you're in as well. And if they don't, and in some parts of the world, we couldn't even gather like this. In some parts of the world, this would be banned, So like if your conditions support your growth, so you can get up in the morning and decide you're going to come and meditate with lots of people. You can decide to go on retreat. If your conditions support that growth, then fantastic. You've got what you need. If they don't, if you're in the wrong system, he says, an oppressive system, it's much more difficult. So Sukhavati, this impure land that we're in, Sukhavati, the Buddhist center, you know, it's impure because we've got to create the conditions. We've got to set out on this journey. And we create the conditions for our own lives. And you're all doing that in some way. And as a community, this sort of heart of a spiritual community, we're creating the conditions for ourselves and others. So the London Buddhist Centre creating conditions for ourselves and others. And when I came along, because I got involved, I didn't get involved at the London Buddhist Centre. I got involved at Bristol, which was the Buddhist Centre there was a small house. And it was a lovely centre. But my understanding of Buddhism then was you go and meditate in a room and then you go home. And that was my experience of being a Buddhist. And then you'd go on retreat, and we rented a retreat place. But then I read these lectures and I read Bante's vision, and I also read what the Buddha had laid out for the vision of the world that he was part of creating. And I was like, it's vast. It's not just being in a room and a house or whatever. It's actually vast. This vision is there to actually make a difference in the world, not just for me. And I was like, thank you very much, I've got what I need. But I then go out in the world and I have to engage with different kinds of activities and people. How do I bring what I am in the world? And actually the world impacts me too. So I, in the end, decided I needed a bigger context to practice. And I'd heard about the London Buddhist Centre, so I came to visit. And I saw a new world. I saw the centre and I recognised the centre. Bigger than the one I was in, loads more going on, lots of different ways of engaging, and I love that. But I also saw a village. So at that time, the London Buddhist Centre was, the actual building was at the heart of a village, a Buddhist village. In fact, I met with the local mayor, the previous mayor, and the local MP a few years ago, and we sat here in the centre, and they told me that the London Buddhist Centre, they called the London Buddhist Centre the Buddhist Quarter. And it was well known as Buddhist Quarter because since the London Buddhist Centre had arrived, it had made a huge difference on the whole area. And they were very grateful, actually. And they remembered, especially the previous mayor, because he'd been around a while, so he remembered its growth. And it was the building, we opened the building, and then when I came along, there was a gift shop across the road. There were still several residential communities, which I lived in some of them. There was a health centre where you could get treatments. If your back was bad, you'd go to the Body Wires, as it was called, and you'd get treated. All kinds of different therapies happening at this health centre. There was a health food shop, so the person who taught you meditation would also sell you your brown rice. There was a housing co-op that actually helped so many people get housing, such a fundamental, important thing and a difficult thing today in London. There was an art centre, so at the weekends or during the week, you'd go and have ceilidhs and do various workshops, and all kind of experimental things happened at the art centre. There's of course our bookshop as well that we still have, and of course we still have our charity shop. But I came along and I was like, oh wow, okay, so being a Buddhist isn't just being on the cushion and working on myself. Being a Buddhist means you're interacting with the world in different ways. You're discovering through practice, you're discovering your gifts, your qualities, your skills, your interests, and you're connecting with other people, and together you're creating something. And you're then sharing it, and people who wouldn't normally necessarily come into contact with the Buddhist Centre, they might not think, I want to learn to meditate. Other people are like that, hi, they would actually go, oh, isn't that guy who's selling me whatever it is in the health food shop, tofu, isn't he friendly? I think he's a Buddhist. It was that kind of that, and the centres down the road. It was that kind of thing that would happen. And I was actually at a dinner part. It was a kind of speaking engagement, a dinner. And after the speaking event happened, I sat with several people on the table. Didn't know them. We were introducing ourselves, and they all said they'd been to the Mandala Cafe that we have next door. Oh, I left out. We had 2 restaurants as well at some point. We had the old restaurant here, and we had another one down the road, Gallery Cafe. So they'd been to our new, relatively new Mandala Cafe, and they were able to tell me about the different staff members and the different. They had a real experience of being here because they'd all, and then actually some of them had come to the Buddhist Centre as a result of that. And some had come to the Buddhist Centre and then gone to the cafe. It was like their experience of Buddhism wasn't just sitting on the meditation cushion. It was an atmosphere. It was a vibe, if you like, that they picked up and that inspired them. That was my experience. Several different ways of, how to practice as a Buddhist, really. And for me, that was deeply inspirational because I then went and thought, okay, I don't know what I'm doing actually in my life yet. I don't know where I'm going to put my energies. I was living in the communities, but I knew that whatever I did, I wanted to be inspired and informed by Buddhist values. And I wanted to have a real sense of working together with others. So I've done lots of different things. I've been an artist. I've been a leadership consultant. I've done lots of different things. I've worked with global activists, but I've always brought my Buddhist values to that. And people have always known that that's what inspires my practice. And when I became a mum, I didn't have much examples, actually. There weren't that many parents around the centre. And I was like, I don't know how to do this. How do I do this as a Buddhist? But I went back into the Buddhist tradition and found, inspirational examples of women who had, been mothers and became advanced practitioners as well. So I then, was inspired by that and got involved in parents and children's activities, which had been already running, but they grew. So I'm really here to say that we've been this, we've had a whole history already here at the centre. When Bhante gave that original talk, the Buddhist Centre was still being formed. It was still being built. He didn't know what was possible. He didn't know what would happen in its history. And we are at the point where, we've been through various iterations. Many of those businesses, for different kind of reasons, closed. And then the centre got really big, really busy. I mean, it's always been big, but it became really busy. And we began to innovate at the centre in different kind of ways. And we're still doing that. And you'll hear about a couple of innovations tonight. So we're still doing that. But there's this question still. How do we as a spiritual community make a difference in the world? How do we individually feel like we're doing that, And how do we collectively know that this place, what we're doing, the values that we espouse, the values that we're living into, how can they be an offering to the world? And it's not that we've got to go and run around and do things usefully, like I've got to be useful, I've got to justify my existence. That's not it either. It's very much like out of the fullness of your practice, out of your own inner journey where you're discovering and opening up your minds and seeing, connecting with values of beauty and truth and love, that one day with others, with the encouragement and inspiration of others, can become an offering. Quite spontaneously, quite creatively, quite naturally, you want to give from who you already are. And I see that in all kinds of ways in my life at the Buddhist Centre. I hear so many stories of people doing that already. And I guess I'm here to say it's possible. We're in a pure land here at the London Buddhist Centre. We can create the conditions for sharing the Buddha's vision in the world and making a difference in the world. If you look around the room, it's all so different. And yet we're here. And yet we share values deeply together. So I'm really excited this evening that I've got 3 guests who have all lived in that way. Sangajit, who's a palliative care nurse, deeply, his Buddhism, his practice really informs how he does that. We have Maitreyi, who was actually one of the founders of the health centre back in the day, but also has done so many other things in her life. And then Kavya Mani, who also works in the NHS, but she's pioneered a project here at the centre called Transforming Self and World. So she's an ideal person to share her experience tonight. On the shrine we have, and I'll end now, but on the shrine we have the 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara. So we have Amitabha, this archetypal Buddha, the Buddha of infinite light and love, really shedding his light to dispel the darkness in the world. And we have Avalokiteshvara, who's got these 1,000 arms, and in each of these hands, there's an implement, there's a tool, there's something that can be beneficial to others. It might be a cooking spoon, it might be a pen, it doesn't matter really. It's a needle and thread. It's like some way that for the fullness of your practice, it sort of flowers, as it were, and then can be an offering to the world. And I'll end there.